We hear that so often that it's the people who make the journey unforgettable. From the moment you arrive on a women's only trip, you are surrounded by a community that's already cheering you on. These trips aren't just vacations, they're touch points. They remind you of who you are when you step away from the noise and give yourself the space to breathe, to laugh, and to grow.
Hey everybody, my name is Mel Fowler. I'm originally from Wyoming, so grew up at the foot of the Bighorn Mountains in north central Wyoming, and I'm currently based in northern Colorado, right next to the Rocky Mountains, so I feel pretty fortunate to be here. I guide full-time for the last 9 years, and I've been fortunate enough to lead hiking, biking, and multi-sport tours all over the world, so both in the US and internationally. And about a year and a half ago, I transitioned over into women-only tours, and I was drawn to this company, and I was drawn to leading women's-only tours, and we'll get into more of the why of that, but it is a really special experience and opportunity I have to work with women from all walks of life.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. I'm Dory. So I'm currently based in Alaska. I grew up on the East Coast of the US, spent my childhood and young adult life camping, hiking, doing just about anything that got me outside. But I realized really early on how lucky I was to have that kind of access to nature. And it really shaped why I love to do what I do today. And that's helping women find their own version of adventure. So while my background isn't in guiding, I've had the privilege of joining a few of our adventures. So here, this is myself with a group in Death Valley and then on our Boundary Waters trip. So getting to see firsthand women come together, support each other, and step outside their comfort zone is what has made this work even more meaningful. So we're excited to share more about how impactful women-only travel can be. Before we dive in and explore what makes women-only adventures so meaningful, here's a quick look at what we'll be going through together today. So we'll start with why women-only adventures exist and why they resonate with so many of us. And then we'll paint a picture of what a day typically looks like on an AGC trip. So the rhythm, the laughter, the surprises. We'll share a few stories that capture the power of these shared experiences, and then travel virtually to some of our favorite destinations. Toward the end, we'll talk about solo travel and how supportive this style of travel can be. And we'll finish with tips for finding a trip that fits where you are right now, whether that be physically, mentally, or whatever season of life you're in. So why women-only adventures? When we talk about women-only adventures, what we're really talking about is space. The kind of space where you can just show up as yourself. So for a lot of travelers, it's the first time in a long time they've done something just for themselves. Maybe they've spent years showing up for others as parents, professionals, caregivers. And then one day they say, you know what, I need this. And they come on a trip. And so fast forward to that first night, there's always a mix of excitement and nerves. Nobody really knows each other yet. But by the second morning, there's laughter over coffee, someone's sharing sunscreen, and that little spark of connection starts to form. And you slowly realize these women get you. So at AGC, we're pretty fortunate to have a large group of gals who keep coming back to us year after year, and some having completed a dozen or more trips with us, and some who have been with us for 2+ decades. And to us, this is such a profound statement of how valuable not only a woman-only trip can be, but also finding a company or a group that you feel safe and comfortable enough with to return time and time again. So here you'll see this is one of our longtime travelers, Kathy, the blonde gal, and she recently has shared with us how she came to join her first AGC trip in 2015 after years of just hiking close to home. So she'd always loved being outdoors, but wanted something bigger, something that would challenge her and let her connect with others who felt the same. And that trip ended up being the Camino de Santiago in Spain. So the Camino wasn't easy for her. She definitely shared that she started the very first mile with blisters and real doubts about finishing. But what stood out most to her wasn't the difficulty. It was the support on the trail. So she talked about how her guide, Deb, stayed by her side every step of the way and how women in her group encouraged her, checked in, and celebrated each day's progress. And so after it was all said and done, Kathy shared, "My main goal was to physically make it to the end, and I did that. But what she didn't expect was what came after, the friendships that continued long beyond the trail." And she and her, what they call Camino sisters, still travel together years later. And Kathy just completed her 9th trip with us this year. So, needless to say, that's the magic that happens on these trips. The walls come down, there's cheering when someone reaches a lookout they didn't think they could, quiet moments that stay with you long after you're home, and laughter so real it feels like you've known each other for years. So, you may come alone, but you never travel alone. So, again, why women only adventures? Women only trips remind you that you're part of something bigger, a community of women who lift each other up.
So, I'm going to talk about what typical day might look like out there with us on the trails or in the kayak. But before we get to the actual, day in the life, before your trip even begins, you're going to have the opportunity to speak with one of your guides, probably a week or so before you leave for the trip. This just gives you a chance to calm any nerves you might have before leaving. It gives you a chance to ask any final questions about any logistics or gear. And it also just gives you a chance to connect with one of your guides who will be there to pick you up. So arrival day happens and your guides have set the scene. So they're going to scoop you up at the local airport or another location that is set. And really, they're just going to be there to facilitate that first day transition from the pickup to the lodging to setting expectations and facilitating conversation and hopefully quelling any last nerves that might be there when you go off to a location that you have never been before with maybe people you've never met. So that is how we kind of start all of our trips. And, it really helps to kind of set those expectations with everybody and just have a chance to ask some questions of everyone and maybe share a fun fact about yourself and just try to settle into the week ahead. So what does a typical day look like? Before getting into the logistics, I just want to point out that as women, typically we are always the ones taking care of everybody else. We're cooking, we're behind the scenes, we're handling, all of the care and nurture for other people in our lives. And I just want to say that this is really a chance for you to leave all of your responsibilities behind, come out with us, and have other women care for you. And so that's what your guides are here for. So we are handling everything for you. So a typical day would start out with, breakfast at our accommodations, whether that's, a really historic lodge in a national park or maybe a VRBO, a vacation home, but your guides are going to be up early. You'll probably arise or awake to the smell of coffee or tea and breakfast cooking. And all you have to do is worry about just getting yourself ready, joining everyone in the kitchen or the dining room and sitting around and enjoying that hearty breakfast that we'll have together before we set out for our adventure. There will also be some time to pack your lunch for the day and get any last minute gear or get yourself settled. We'll load up in the vans and then we'll head out to the trail. So at the trail, we might do a little stretch session. We'll go over any last minute safety details or trail knowledge or any cultural knowledge about the area to share. And then we'll take off. So while we're out there on the trail together, this is one of my favorite spots. This picture here is a photo from Bryce Canyon, which we'll talk about in a little bit here. But your guides are locals to the area or they've been an experienced guide in the region for many, many years. And so what we are here for is to teach you all about the geology, the variety of wildlife, interesting history, cultural facts, the native and indigenous peoples of the area. And so there will be a lot of moments on the trail to share that kind of information. So it's not just getting out there and being physically active in the outdoors. You are learning really cool information about where you're at for the week. So your guides are there to facilitate that. We always stop for snack breaks. We'll stop to gather everybody if we get spread out there on the trails. And of course, we always pick the best spot for a lunch break where we have a chance to take a rest and chat and continue getting to know your fellow travel companions. And what I want to stress too is that these these trips, you are able to go at your own pace. So often there are, nerves around what if I'm not as fit as everyone else? What if I can't keep up? Because we always have two guides out there on the trail. One is leading, the other one is what we call the sweep. So they'll be behind the group, making sure no one gets left behind. And so really you can just relax and go at your own pace. We want you to be able to stop and take photos out there or look at interesting trees or wildflowers, or if you spot some, wildlife, we want you to be able to take it all in and go at your own pace. And then after a day out on the trail, or maybe we were in the kayak or taking another cultural tour, we'll gather together in the evenings. And again, this is a chance to just relax and think about the day that we just had. So your guides are going to be cooking your dinner while you can just hang out and chat again with your new friends. Maybe enjoy a glass of wine or some hot tea. And while the guides make dinner, you just have a chance to enjoy your surroundings and the lodging that we're in. And often, we'll hang out around the dinner table and we'll talk about our favorite moments from the day. What really was your highlight? What was your favorite thing that you noticed from the day that we just had together? And then also in the evenings, we'll go over what the next day is going to look like so you can kind of get prepared in your mind and get your gear prepared for the next day. And you really have that sense of excitement when you go to bed that tomorrow's going to be even better. So we do have a variety, as I've mentioned, kayaking and hiking already. We have quite the variety of activities sometimes on our trips, but wherever we go, whatever activity we might be doing, what continues to be the thread through these women-only tours is really the connection to nature and the connection to each other. And I can't tell you how many times I've been guiding these trips where I've just seen beautiful friendships take bloom and just continue to blossom throughout the week. And, you're meeting up with people from all walks of life, but you find that you have things in common with each other. Maybe you're both empty nesters, or maybe, you've gone through a really hard and traumatic time in your life and you're out here just doing something for yourself finally and meeting other women who are in that same phase of life as you. So really it's not only discovering parts of yourself that might have been hidden for a while or maybe dormant, but it's also just bonding with other women who, have the same values of being out there in nature together. So it's a really special experience.
So now that we've heard Mel describe what a day on one of our trips looks like, so the hiking, the meals, the laughter, let's talk about what women actually take home from these experiences. So we hear again and again phrases like, I came home lighter, or I remembered what it feels like to play, or more often than not, I didn't realize how much I needed time just for me. Because the truth is, these trips aren't just about checking off destinations or chasing miles. They're about how you feel when you're out there, the mix of challenge and ease, or being fully present in a way that's just so rare in everyday life. One of the most beautiful things to witness on any woman-only trip is not just how connection builds, but how confidence unfolds. So sometimes it's subtle, like when someone starts nervous at the face of a rock scramble and then ends up leading the way for someone else, or when someone who never thought of herself as outdoorsy suddenly finds herself laughing her way through a section of terrain she never imagined she could do. And Andrea, another one of our travelers who you see here, is such a wonderful example of what happens when women keep saying yes to adventure. So she's been traveling with us since 2021, and with more than a dozen AGC trips under her belt, it's safe to say that what keeps her coming back isn't just the destinations, it's the friendships. On one of her very first trips, Intro to Lightweight Backpacking, she met two other women, Barb and Marianne, who had her laughing the entire week. And since then, she's reunited with them outside of trips. She's gone on hikes with them in places like Shenandoah National Park. And she just keeps finding that every trip she does go on brings a new circle of friends. And what I also love about Andrea's story and really so many of our travelers' stories is that it highlights something deeper that keeps women coming back to women-only adventures. And so she said it beautifully, being surrounded by adventurous women, some like-minded, some not, is one of the reasons I keep coming back. And she's not alone. We hear that so often, that it's the people who make the journey unforgettable. And that's the power of a shared experience. When nature and community overlap, transformation really starts to happen. And it's quietly sometimes, but sometimes it's profoundly. And these trips aren't just vacations, they're touch points. They remind you of who you are when you step away from the noise and give yourself the space to breathe, to laugh, and to grow.
So, where do we go? Well, again, being fortunate enough to be a guide, I've had the opportunity to experience some really amazing places in the world. With 57 hours, we've got quite a collection for you to see, but we're just going to highlight some of these special places that, are some of our favorites. So, journey with us to first up, New Mexico. So, if you've never been to the Southwest in the United States, definitely New Mexico is the place to be. So, it really embodies all that the American Southwest is. It's a really perfect combination of Native American, Mexican, and European American cultures and traditions. You'll learn so much about the rich history of people in the area. It's also a great chance you can see from these pictures to explore the landscape of the Southwest, these iconic vistas with these mesas and buttes off in the distance, and really that desert feel and all the desert flora and fauna that come with that. So we'll be hiking, and on this trip it's equal parts, exploring the Southwest landscape, but also, some art and cultural heritage as well. And if you're a foodie, this is a good trip to come on because the Southwest cuisine is second to none if that's your style. So, some of the highlights here, some of these photos, you can just see how beautiful it is. But we get to hike in Bandelier National Monument and Chaco Canyon. And in those places, you're able to see dwellings from the ancient ancestral Puebloan peoples. And so your guides are going to teach you all about that heritage there. You also get to kayak and raft on the Rio Grande River. So I'm sure that most of us or all of you have heard of the Rio Grande, the infamous Rio Grande River. And not only do you get to hike next to it on some of the days, but you'll actually get to go into it and kayak and do a rafting trip down the river. So it's pretty special. And again, you can see, I don't know if there's anything better than a Southwest sunset, but so beautiful. And, we also get to explore the artsy town of Santa Fe. So, famous artists like Georgia O'Keeffe made her home there. And so it's a really special place. And not to mention a visit to the Taos Pueblo. So again, weaving in the Native American heritage that's in this area and still prominent today. So another favorite trip, if the Southwest isn't your thing, we could invite you to come explore Appalachia. So over here on the eastern United States in the Appalachian Mountains, we have Shenandoah National Park. Shenandoah is a really special place. I've been fortunate to guide both cycling and hiking trips here, and it is so beautiful. So again, we have just the opportunity to explore nature, and it's really so different, from Santa Fe. You can see in the pictures here. Now we're kind of enveloped in these tall, skinny trees. We're exploring in the forest, and then we get also these amazing sweeping views of the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia here. So the reason we, call this a history tour as well is because within Shenandoah National Park, there are over 300 structures that are on the list of the National Registry of Historic Places. We get to stay in 2 of those. So we'll be staying in these historical park lodges. And then we'll be learning about the history of the Civilian Conservation Corps in the area and how they preserved 40% of this park is wilderness. And so that means that it's going to be preserved in this state, hopefully forever. So again, you can see that you'll have a variety of experiences here because the specific place that we're at in Shenandoah Valley in the Appalachian Mountains is the Blue Ridge area. So the Blue Ridge Range contains the Appalachian Trail, so the infamous AT. And so you'll be hiking along where so many have hiked before you, right? From thousands of years ago, Native Americans to people that are through hiking the AT. So it's pretty special. And these views are amazing. And if the Appalachian Trail has ever been on your list to explore or at least see a part of, there's over 100 miles of the AT within the park. So that is also pretty special. And then we get a chance to visit some caverns as well. So there really is a wide variety of nature and geology here in this region. All right, so another favorite trip, especially for me, is the California redwoods. So when we go to the Redwoods National and State Parks in Northern California, in Humboldt County, this is so, so special. I was able to guide here this year and take a group of women into this area. And, this particular trip, we really are focusing on slowing down. We're focusing on wellness. We are learning how to connect with nature in a deeper way. We learn about regulating our nervous systems in the forest. You always kind of hear about this thing called forest bathing. And it really is, I would say, life-changing. So the opportunity to hike amongst these giant redwoods is really, really special. And so your guides are going to take you on this journey of really resetting and finding your own sense of well-being in nature. And so, while we're here, we stay on Yurok tribal lands in the historic Requa Inn in Klamath, California. These coastal redwoods are the tallest trees in the world. So you can see here, it's just like there's nothing that compares to seeing, these trees in real life and just staring up at these towering giants above your head. And, within the redwoods, there really is this special, different sort of energy here. It's just immediately calming. It's immediately, just removes you from kind of the chaos of the outside world. And it really does feel like we've stepped into a different, I don't know, portal or something, because it's just really quite magical is the way to explain it. These trees are so special. They're the tallest in the world. Some of them are 1,500 years old. And so this is a chance to take slower paced hikes that aren't as long, because the purpose here is, again, to connect and reset your nervous system in nature. And then we just want to show you again this photo of the coast here in California. So some of our hikes take us out to this beach here. And again, we get to kind of have the best of all worlds here. You're seeing the ocean, you're seeing the deep forest. We also get to tide pool. We get to visit with Yurok tribal members about their experience in the area as well. So there's always that cultural piece of connecting with the local people there. All right, so moving to my backyard. So the Southern Rocky Mountains that contain Rocky Mountain National Park in Colorado. So this is about an hour from me. I'm so lucky to call this home. So if you're looking, maybe you want to really challenge your fitness and your peak bagging skills, this might, be something that calls to you. So here in the Rockies, we have 4 different ecosystems. We get to explore all of them, and it really does not only test your fitness, but the rewards are just quite amazing, as you can see in some of these photos here. So again, this is one of our harder trips. I would say it's definitely on the high end. We're hiking lots of miles and a lot of elevation gain as well. But this particular trip, we're starting in Boulder, Colorado. So we'll have some chance to acclimatize to the altitude, because, that's one of the main things about this trip is we're up here. So I'm living currently at 5,000 feet. And so we'll get up to as high as 12,000 feet on this trip. So we do plan it quite well in that we have a chance to do some lower elevation hikes to just kind of get our lungs settled a little bit and to see how we feel at altitude. But as I said, we're exploring all ecosystems here. So we'll be hiking within the montane, the subalpine, and the alpine tundra. Again, about 9 to 14 miles a day. So it is on the higher end of our mileage. But your reward, look at this photo. So this is Bluebird Lake in high up in the Rockies, and there's just nothing quite like working all day to then come up and over a ridge that gives you this amazing view. It's quite incredible and it's worth every amount of effort. So every day we're rewarded with granite peaks and these high alpine lakes that really there's no shortage of. And, within the Rocky Mountain National Park, there are actually over 60 peaks that are higher than 12,000 feet. So while we don't hike any that are maybe above that, we do get to climb up Hallett Peak. We do also get to hike up to Chasm Lake, which sits right below the only 14er in the park, which is Long's Peak. So it's a really special. And this is one where every time I've guided it, because it is a little bit more challenging, right? And so often women come and they're a little bit nervous for this trip, even more so than others, because they're like, oh my gosh, I'm not sure how I'm going to feel at altitude. But I will tell you, the whole group becomes your cheering partners. So for example, on the hike up to Chasm Lake, there is a little bit of a boulder scramble. And so if you've never done anything like that, it can be a little bit intimidating, but your guides are there to help you navigate that. And, last year, one woman in particular just got really nervous and was like, I don't think I can do it. I'll just stay down here. But everybody rallied behind her and they're like, you can do it. And like the guides, we rallied around her and everybody just kind of took a chance to like help her up, whether it was physically like reaching for her hand or helping her place a foot or verbally just giving her the encouragement that she needed. And so we all made it up to the lake and it was just really fantastic. So there's just moments like that out on the trail all the time. All right. And another crowd favorite. So the last trip that we'll talk about here is our Bryce and Zion National Parks. So again, desert landscape, but Utah. So these are located in Utah, and Utah really is also like another planet. I can't quite describe to you how varied and different from the rest of the country this landscape is. And so our Bryce and Zion National Parks, as the name indicates, we're going to be exploring those two national parks, really popular in southern Utah. This trip is a really awesome way to explore this part of the Grand Staircase, which is a geological feature within the broader Colorado Plateau. We get to stay in St. George, Utah for the first night, and then we move to the historic and iconic Zion Canyon Lodge. So staying right in the middle of Zion National Park. And so we'll get really varied landscapes here. So Zion contains, mostly geological layers of Navajo sandstone that you can see here in this photo. The Zion Canyon's rock walls rise up to 2,000 feet on average. So we'll be hiking below them and then kind of hiking to midpoints right in the middle of these cliffs. And we hike all the best trails in Zion National Park. So you may have heard of Emerald Pools or the Watchman. And of course, there's always a chance to hike up to the infamous Angel's Landing in Zion Canyon, which is truly spectacular and maybe a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And then here, we'll go from the Navajo sandstone in Zion to the higher reaches of the Grand Staircase, which you can see here. Now we're in Bryce Canyon National Park. A little bit different geology you can see here. It's mostly limestone, and these formations are what we call hoodoos. And so the famous hoodoos you'll see there. And this picture is just such a good representation. There is no filter or editing applied to this photo. The sky really is that blue, and the contrast against these orange marbled formations is incredible. You just look around all the time in constant awe, like, how can this be real? And so again, learning about how the hoodoos formed, what's the history of the native peoples in the area, the Southern Paiute, also Navajo have a presence here. I'm going to try to say the word for the hoodoos from the Southern Paiute name. So it's Enka Kuwasowitz, which means red painted faces. So the hoodoos here in Native American lore were once people who were punished by the trickster god. So it's a really interesting and fascinating history here. So no matter where we go, I just want to impress upon you the magic that happens is, of course, we're going to these amazing places, but what really sets us all up for this magical experience are our fellow travelers and the friendships and bonds that form out there in these really special landscapes.
I don't think we could have picked a better lineup of trips to spotlight. I feel like every time I hear someone talk about those destinations, I'm just ready to pack my suitcase and go. So, next on our agenda, we initially called this section Tips for Solo Travelers, but honestly, it's less about tips and more about truths. So, one of the most common things we hear from women considering their first trip is, I'd love to do something like this, but I just don't have anyone to go with. And our go to response to that is perfect because most women who join for the first time actually do come solo. And that's part of what makes these trips so special. And what happens next in that scenario is one of my favorite parts, watching a group of total strangers turn into a team. You see women encouraging each other up the trail, like Mel shared, laughing through whatever weather the day throws at them, or celebrating milestones, some tiny ones, some huge ones. I mean, we've had people who have been crossing off their bucket lists for national parks or trying to reach every state, and they've reached those goals with us. And I've been fortunate to see this team bonding experience play out firsthand. So on our Boundary Waters canoe adventure, which we don't offer every year, I was able to join it as a solo traveler myself. And it turned out that every woman on that trip ended up coming solo. But once we hit the water, we really had to instantly become a team. So we were paddling in pairs and trios. We were coordinating strokes and choppy water, giving each other breaks. And we had those comical moments where we were kind of learning and yelling, J stroke, which quickly was followed by, okay, never mind, just keep straight, because the wind certainly had other plans or a mind of its own. And at portages, we had to haul all our gear. So we were taking turns kind of shifting between the canoes, the bags, and rotating there. At camp, everyone pitched in where they could, setting up tents, cooking, breaking down in the mornings. And even nearly every day on the water, we were encountering these shallow, rocky sections where canoes would essentially get caught on them. And our guides were out there problem solving in real time, helping us maneuver safely without damaging the carbon fiber canoes. So it was a full 5 days of teamwork from sunup to sundown. And by the end, it felt like we'd known each other for years. And it was just really special to watch that unfold. And so, I mean, we design our itineraries with this in mind. So we have small groups, women guides, flexible pacing, and a rhythm that lets you do things your own way while still making you a part of the bigger picture. So you don't have to be a seasoned hiker or have the fanciest gear. You just have to show up curious and willing to try. And we take care of and guide you through the rest. And what I love is that when everything is set up to help people thrive, that's when the friendships that form feel almost effortless. And so more often than not, we get stories that really show what that looks like Kate and Becky, another pair of our APC travelers. You can see them here in the middle of the photo. Kate joined her first trip in Utah's national parks, where, wouldn't you know it, she met another first-timer named Becky. The two expressed that they could not have been more different. One hated the cold, one avoided the heat, one loved veggies, the other wouldn't touch them, but still they clicked instantly. And that first trip was just the beginning for them. So they started running 10Ks together and have since traveled to places like West Virginia, Colorado, and even Minnesota for more adventures. So what started as a solo trip for each of them turned into a friendship that now spans years and miles. And their story is just such a great example of what can happen when you just decide to go for it. And that's really the heart of it. So you may travel solo, but you're never actually alone. From the moment you arrive on a women's only trip, you are surrounded by a community that's already cheering you on.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to guide Kate and Becky in the Rockies last year, and they were such a fun duo. And again, they really were so different from each other. And honestly, they didn't even hike together. Kate was always like blazing ahead, and Becky was in the back with the sweep guide. And so, even though travelers may come together or plan to come together, I do think our groups really do foster this, desire to get to know everyone in the group. And you can see different connections forming as well, even though sometimes friends do come together on a trip. So, yeah, they were really fun to have. Okay, so how do you find the right adventure for you. So, yeah, there's all these options. There's no shortage of amazing places to go to. So, obviously, you may have something in mind, whether you want to do some hiking or maybe you multi sport is more of your thing where you want to include some water activities. But just wanted to kind of briefly touch on, how we rate our trips. Verbiage that we use on 57 Hours website is essentially easy, moderate, and challenging. And so, we do rate our trips from levels 1 to 5, but calling them easy, moderate, or challenging is just an easier way to kind of conceptualize them. So if you're looking for something that's a little bit easier and not so high level of, effort, think our paddling with the manatees in Florida, or again, that redwoods trip, the wellness trips in the redwoods. And, that's a good way to ease in if you're not sure about your fitness level or what kind of adventure you're looking for. Our moderate trips are going to be more like right in the middle. They really do allow yourself to challenge yourself on these trips. You can get in, some higher mileage hikes, maybe 6 to 8 miles, but think like Shenandoah National Park is a really good representation of a moderate level trip. And then again, those challenging trips like the Rockies and even like Bryce and Zion, because, we are doing more elevation gain on those and a little bit longer in mileage. So, there's really something for everyone. So again, if you're not sure where to start, give 57 Hours a call. They're going to help you navigate through what might be the best fit for you. So we do have something for everyone.
Yeah. Thank you for having us. It was fun. It's always a joy to talk about this.
We love talking about women's travel, and hopefully it's inspired, you to come join us out there on the trail.